BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNid88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And welcome to BBOR, the home of true crime talk radio and your premier destination for unsolved mysteries, criminal psychology, and exploring the dark side of cyberspace. My name is Ned DeHaan, and I am your host, as well as the creator of AstroPsych 400 here on YouTube, and regular contributor to the Zodiac Killer channel. And a great way to support these shows is just by listening to some more content. But you can also go over to Amazon.com and have a look at the book Killer on a White Horse, written by me, Ned DeHaan. It is a novel, murder mystery, inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, but it is indeed fictional. However, who doesn't love a good mystery? And there is always the TeeSpring page. Feel free to check out some of the merchandise. And remember, being weird is not a crime. Let the show begin. Okay, hello everybody. Today is Wednesday, another Ripper Wednesday. Welcome to the show. How's everybody doing? Just a couple of quick announcements and reminders before we truly begin. The first is that if you go to the links in the description box, you'll find one for BuyMeACoffee.com. I talk to you guys about that website a lot. That's the donation page for the show. But also, there are links to the books Killer on a White Horse and Down the Dark Lane, 3 thrillers from the Motel. And somebody asked me a question recently by saying, are you going to do an Audible version of your books, like putting up audiobooks on Audible? And the answer is not on Audible, but I am going to release Down the Dark Lane on YouTube as an audio version, and it's going to be done at some point in the future, most likely this year. Down the Dark Lane had 3 short stories put together, and I have decided to release that in audiobook form, and it will be on YouTube for free. And as always, you guys can hit the like button and subscribe, and I would like to jump right into today's topic, talking about Jack the Ripper, perhaps the world's most famous unsolved murder mystery. In this episode, I would like to go through some of the suspects that I've talked to you about on Ripper Wednesday, and I want to try and show which ones I think are very strong, which ones I think are not, because I've said this in the past. Maybe this isn't the greatest service to the world, but one thing that BlackBoxOnlineRadio has actually done is I've taken a lot of the true crime theories out there and organized them. And I would like to do that for this episode. And also, of course, I do a segment every Monday about the Zodiac Killer called Zodiac Monday. If you're curious about that mystery, I invite you to visit some of the suspect list episodes that I've done for that case. But with Jack the Ripper, I would first like to give the introduction that there was a crime spree that was committed in England in 1888 that has been attributed to one person who has never been identified. Some people call this person Jack the Ripper. Some people just simply use the term Whitechapel murderer. There are 5 canonical victims, and they are Polly Nichols, Annie Chapman, Liz Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Kelly. The crimes took place between August 31st and November 9th of 1888. So, with the suspects, who committed these murders? First, I would like to look at the strong suspects. This is purely my interpretation of the events, my interpretation of the works that have been shared, my interpretation of other people's theories, and my interpretation of things that have been shared to the public. And firstly, in no particular order, we have Charles Lechmere, Aaron Kosminski, Francis Thompson, and Joseph Barnett. Now, again, it's not saying that just because I said Charles Lechmere's name first, that doesn't mean I think he's the strongest suspect. What he has going for him is that he has a direct connection to multiple crime scenes, not only the murder of Polly Nichols, where he is actually a witness. Charles Lechmere is the first person to find the body of Polly Nichols, and to the credit of Edward Stowe, he points out that based on his walking path to work, he would have had 8 minutes unaccounted for when he was trying to, when he was going to work before he's interrupted by Robert Paul, who was the other witness to the murder of Polly Nichols. So he could have spent as much as 8 minutes alone with the victim, and not to mention the fact that he also grew up in the area where Liz Stride was murdered, the third victim, who was murdered in somewhat of a different location compared to the other victims. And, I mean, there are a lot of points for Charles Lechmere in terms of geographic profiling. And also, just some people think that the way that Jack the Ripper committed these crimes was he murdered and mutilated women, disemboweling them, but he did it by removing his coat and removing his gloves, and then quickly just put on the coat and the gloves, and then exited the crime scene. Okay, so that's one thing. The next one is Aaron Kosminski, and Aaron Kosminski was thought of as a suspect by law enforcement. He was a Polish Jew who was a barber, but as I understand, he wasn't really working regularly. He had mental health issues, and he was very disorganized mentally, and he ultimately ended up going into asylum, but law enforcement began to examine Aaron Kosminski, and a lot of people have tried to vilify him. In fact, some people to this day think that Aaron Kosminski is the prime suspect, and he was perhaps a highly regarded suspect at the time. Francis Thompson is a suspect that I encountered because of Richard Patterson, who wrote the book Jack the Ripper, The Works of Francis Thompson. He was a famous poet. He went on to become a famous poet, and I think that he matches the personality of Jack the Ripper. Personally, this guy would have grown up to become Jack the Ripper, and some of the reasons for that would be that he has just very childish personality. He had some type of social deviance. He was a gifted underperformer. He was brilliant, but he never truly excelled at his careers before becoming a poet. And if you were to go on Wikipedia, you would see something that, okay, Richard Patterson thinks that Francis Thompson was Jack the Ripper, and he cites interpretations of his poetry. Sure, but that's really not the heart and soul of the issue. And because I think Francis Thompson is a very strong Jack the Ripper suspect, I was going through Richard Patterson's documentary, which is available here on YouTube. I believe it's just under the name Jack the Ripper Francis Thompson. And he talks about how he was a very childish person well into his teen years, and he would even just build forts in the library and surround himself with piles of books, and he would try to build them as a structure and enclosure, and people would bully him at school, and then he would just try and hide out there. But okay, so also antisocial, victim of bullying, and he even had a relationship with a prostitute for a while who rejected him as soon as he became somewhat of a notable writer and poet, and he may have actually been in love with that woman. Now, a big strike against Francis Thompson, because I always give counterbalance, even if I think highly of a suspect, a big strike against Francis Thompson is something that it was shared by Richard Patterson in the same documentary, and that is that the murder of Liz Stride, the third victim in the Jack the Ripper case, took place on September 30th of 1888, and it was outside of a socialist workers' club, and that Francis Thompson says he believes that the members of the Socialist Workers' Club were atheists, and Francis Thompson was a deeply religious person. He was a failed priest, actually, tried to become a priest, but very, very shortly before becoming a priest, he was kicked out of the priesthood, and he says that his deeply religious background would have provoked him into committing the murder of Liz Stride outside of a socialist workers' club. I think that there's absolutely no evidence to suggest that. Firstly, it doesn't make sense from a logical standpoint. I mean, this guy is deeply religious, therefore he is going to, commit murders as insults to atheists. That is just a pure reach. In my particular interpretation, is incomprehensible unless he's going to go down the pathway that he thinks that he's doing some type of goodness in the world. And it's not only that, it's that Richard Patterson has also made the statement that he was trying to make a particular symbol by committing the murders in different locations, the symbol of Pisces, or maybe just trying to form them into an X. I've heard this many times. Someone has also said that the Ripper murders were committed to form a pentagram because they were satanic. Some people think they're satanic, other people think they're religious, but also there's this element to form a symbol of Pisces that would be astrological. And there are lots of different claims that I just think are unsubstantiated, unsupported, and I'm going to give you guys my honest take on the subject, because I rarely hold back what I genuinely think on this channel, and that is that Richard Patterson has assembled an amazing case for Francis Thompson being Jack the Ripper, but also, he might be going too far with his own thought process. Like, he's getting caught up in his own mental wormhole, if that makes sense to you, because the amount of detail that he has assembled about Francis Thompson's life is shocking, and he truly is an expert on this famous English writer. But I almost have to wonder, are all of these stories about Francis Thompson true? And by his own admission, he is going through Francis Thompson's writings, as well as people who would have known him at the time going through their journals and memoirs and such. But you just have to wonder, is all of it true? All of these things that they say about Francis Thompson and the stories of him at school, and could certain details be misrepresented, and people don't always tell the truth? Now, Joseph Barnett was the next suspect on the list, and I think he's a very strong suspect because he has a direct connection to the final Jack the Ripper victim, Mary Kelly. And the reason I put him so highly on the list is, well, it's either going to be the person who found the body or the ex-boyfriend, right? Now, some people think that Joseph Barnett was the ex-boyfriend of Mary Kelly. I've never found anything that has truly substantiated that. He lived in the same building as Mary Kelly, and I'm, again, giving you my honest take on the subject. I think that he had some type of intimate relationship with Mary Kelly, the final victim, but I don't believe they were in a committed relationship together. Not to mention, Mary Kelly most likely was seeing other men because of her profession. But with Joseph Barnett, he got into an argument with Mary Kelly, shortly before her murder. And we're talking about more than 7 days. I believe it's October 30th of 1888. They got into an argument that was witnessed by others. And also that this whole concept of this person has an obsession with Mary Kelly, therefore he's committing the murders to get revenge on women because he can't obtain the woman that he truly wants. That's why the murder of Mary Kelly was so vicious. It was all about her. And I follow the narrative completely. Joseph Barnett also is age appropriate. I think the Ripper was around 30 years old. I don't think that he was in his early 20s, like a suspect such as Aaron Kosminski, who was 23, even though Kosminski has... I think he was the prime suspect for a reason. He might be the exception that proves the rule, but Joseph Barnett was 30 years old. He had a speech impediment. He also worked in a fish market, so he would have been very good with a knife, even though he might not have had strong anatomical knowledge. And as I said, the person who found the body, or the ex-boyfriend, he would be the person who would be very likely to murder Mary Kelly. And I have a whole episode about him, as well as all of these suspects that I've put in this top ranking that are strong suspects. Now let's move on to middle of the ground suspects, middle of the road, middle of the deck suspects, mid-level suspects, let's just call them that. And they would be Jacob Levy, Chaim Hyams, and George Hutchinson. Jacob Levy was a butcher. He was most likely a schizophrenic, and he would also go on long walks at night. He would have been someone who might have had a very strong anatomical knowledge, being a butcher, but not like a medical doctor, also using all types of knives very frequently with his job. And he also contracted syphilis that would have affected his mental state. So you have a schizophrenic who has syphilis, and I've never read anything that he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. That comes from a story from his wife that stated that he was hearing voices and, auditory hallucinations, as well as the hallucinations were telling him to commit certain actions. And if these stories are true, I think he would be a mid-level suspect. The reason why he's not in the strong suspects list is because he would have been, well, there's just like a little bit of lacking evidence. I don't know that much about him. Not much has been shared about him. And the same point is true for the next suspect, Chaim Hyams. But I have a final note on Jacob Levy. I particularly liked the part where it's possible that he was witnessed at one of the crime scenes by somebody who turned out to be his first cousin. And then that guy just decided to lie and say that, no, that wasn't Jacob Levy, or just he's not identifying him, even though he recognized him at a crime scene, but he didn't want to rat him out because he was a family member. But this brings up the whole question of how could Jack the Ripper commit these crimes and then return to normalcy without people noticing? Maybe the Ripper did indeed go into an asylum after the murder of Mary Kelly, November 9th of 1888, and a lot of people do that. They, like with Chaim Hyams, the next suspect on the list, the researchers have gone through the asylum records and they found out about Chaim Hyams. But with Francis Thompson, who is a stronger suspect, I particularly like the detail about how he would have committed the crimes in drug-induced states. I repeat, drug-induced states. He was addicted to opium, actually. And it's not done because of an illness like schizophrenia or even syphilis, but he committed the crimes while he was high on drugs, and that's why the crimes were so vicious against women. But also, that shows that how someone could return to normalcy if they can some way somehow get off of whatever addiction that they have. I mean, like, people can take drugs regularly, and some people can wane off them. Other people have to go through a very intense detox state. So it is possible to slowly wane off of any type of substance, depending on who it is. I mean, really depending on who it is and how they respond to the withdrawal. But the next one is Chaim Hyams. He was a cigar maker. He worked in a factory that made cigars, so he's cutting up things with a knife all day like tobacco. And same story. I just don't know that much about him enough to put him as a strong suspect. But the belief with him is that he committed the crimes because he experienced epileptic seizures, and that affected his judgment, his decision making, and his ability to control his impulses. But that's the explanation. It's not like schizophrenia with Jacob Levy, where he can't control it. He has side effects after having epileptic seizures, and it's altered his neurochemistry. And I thought that was rather interesting, but I really don't have a lot of info about Chaim Hyams. I'm going to do another episode on him in the future once I'm able to obtain more. With George Hutchinson, though, he has a direct connection to the crime scene. The murder of Mary Kelly. He's seen outside of her building, November 9th, 1888, and in the evening hours. And he has also gone on the record saying this. He was talked to by multiple people. But the problem is, with George Hutchinson, some people believe that he was just simply a pathological liar, that he just made up the story because he wanted to insert himself in the case, or he was just saying things that weren't true because he wanted to be the center of attention, and that is quite possible. But he's a mid-level suspect because, as I said, he was seen outside of her residence and she was murdered. Now, going to the bottom of the barrel suspects, these are the people who you will find on Jack the Ripper websites who I think absolutely were not Jack the Ripper, and they would be Thomas Cream, Francis Tumblety, Michael Ostrog, and James Maybrick. Now, these guys are some of them are definitely troubled individuals. Thomas Cutbush would be someone who would also be a bottom of the barrel suspect, very troubled, but I just don't think that they were Jack the Ripper. Now, Thomas Cream and Michael Ostrog were most likely incarcerated in other countries, the United States and France, respectively, at the times of the Ripper. During almost the entirety of the Ripper murder was with Michael Ostrog and Thomas Cream as well. It's quite possible that he didn't get out of prison until 1891. The Ripper murders took place in 1888. So, again, very, very weak suspect. And so that's why they're at the bottom of the barrel. With Francis Tumblety, he is someone who was a con man, a fascinating individual. I mean, I should do a true crime episode just on Francis Tumblety, not about the Ripper cases, but about him just as a con man, because he was an outrageous individual. And, I mean, I think that we could find all kinds of things that would be worthy of a discussion, but I just don't think that he was Jack the Ripper. Now, with somebody like James Maybrick, he most likely becomes a suspect because of a forged diary. Someone forged a diary in his name, and I could say the guy's name, Michael Barrett, but in the early 90s, someone claimed that they were in the possession of a diary written by James Maybrick where he confessed to being Jack the Ripper. I think it was a hoax. I think it was a forgery. I think it was a lie. But James Maybrick did go on to be murdered himself in what was known as the iceberg poisoning, and his wife, Florence Maybrick, was convicted of the crime. I don't even think that she did that. I think that James Maybrick overdosed himself on arsenic. But that's my take on the subject. We can explore that more in a future episode as well. With Thomas Cutbush, though, he would be someone whom I think was a mentally ill man. He stabbed 2 women in the buttocks after the Whitechapel murders ended, and normally a serial killer doesn't start out more vicious than he ends up. Normally a serial killer isn't going to completely mutilate and disembowel women and then going to go to stabbing them in the buttocks. And in 1894 there was a publication called The Sun that revealed this expose about how Thomas Cutbush was Jack the Ripper, and I think you can get the idea. He was vilified by a publication, but doesn't mean he actually did it. I don't think Thomas Cutbush was a strong suspect at all. And I'm also going to add an additional name to the list. Montague Druitt. Montague John Druitt, also referred to as MJ Druitt, because I think that if we're going to talk about troubled individuals, Montague John Druitt would fit into there. Absolutely not Jack the Ripper, though, because he is someone who would have been dealing with a lot of depression, maybe humiliation and embarrassment. He committed suicide in 1888, but I just don't believe that he would have committed the Whitechapel murders, because it's the theory that he commits the murders and his mental state is deteriorating, but after the murder of Mary Kelly, he just returns to normalcy and he's able to go back to work for 4 weeks or however long it was, and nobody notices anything, and then he commits suicide and his body is found in the River Thames. However, I just don't believe that that fits up with anything associated with the River. I just think that he was a troubled guy who was depressed, and he might have been exposed as for some type of trouble at his job. And some people think that Montague John Druitt was a closeted homosexual, and he was outed as being a homosexual, and that's why he committed suicide. But in the episode that I did on him, I was just like, speculation, speculation, speculation. That just seems like guesswork on the part of people, but it's a reasonable guess. I mean, I can follow the narrative at least, but I just didn't see any facts that truly supported that. And now, I would like to go to the free-floating suspects. These are the suspects whom I wouldn't put in any of these categories because I simply don't know where to put them. And they are Walter Sickert, Louis Diemschutz, and Isaac Kosa-Brodsky. Walter Sickert was a famous painter, and Louis Diemschutz and Isaac Kosa-Brodsky were 2 witnesses that found the body of Liz Stride, or they were witnesses to the body of Liz Stride after the murder. I shouldn't say that they found her body. And the reason why these people are listed as free-floating suspects is because I have so much trouble trying to actually put them in any particular place. Patricia Cornwell, the novelist, has written 2 books about Jack the Ripper, and her suspect is Walter Sickert, and she makes a compelling case that Walter Sickert was Jack the Ripper. However, I just simply don't know if her conclusions are true or not. And sometimes you just have to go with a gut feeling, and I think that she's completely mistaken about Walter Sickert being Jack the Ripper, and she also believes that Walter Sickert is the prime suspect in the Camden Town murder, which took place in the early 1900s. And I don't think that has any Ripper relation, but you can't just simply look at someone who is a famous artist and say, okay, well, this guy made some dark and disturbing paintings, therefore he has a direct connection to the murders, Jack the Ripper's bedroom and such. But also, I mean, all of the points that she has assembled could just as easily be attributed to people like Charles Lechmere and Aaron Kosminski and Francis Thompson and Joseph Barnett. Now, maybe she is right, maybe she's not. With Louis Diemschutz and Isaac Kosa-Brodsky, these guys are part of a theory that was created by Randy Williams, author of Sherlock Holmes and the Autumn of Terror. And his theory is that it was a conspiracy that was created by Russian Jewish anarchists, or really just anarchists, but some of them were from Russia and Jewish in origin, and it was about making a mockery of Christianity to affect modern culture. It was orchestrated by Peter Kropotkin, the very famous Russian anarchist, and it was managed by Louis Deemschutz and carried out by Isaac Kosabrodsky. Kosabrodsky did the majority of the ripping, and he cites very strong points about how that Louis Deemschutz and Isaac Kosabrodsky were just total liars after the murder of Liz Stride. They have a direct connection to the crime scene. They also have reasons. There are reasons to doubt their stories, and I'm just simply not sure where to put that. Are they strong suspects or are they bottom of the barrel suspects? My immediate first reaction when I found out that Louis Deemschutz was a suspect was that, no, absolutely not. That's ridiculous. Then I heard Randy Williams do his presentation. I was like, okay, this guy has some strong reasons why he thinks that Louis Deemschutz and Isaac Kosabrodsky committed the murders, and there's another individual who's involved in the Ripper crimes. His name is Samuel Friedman. He would have been the participant who committed the murder of Catherine Eddowes and Randy Williams' theory, but that's something that I've covered in a couple different episodes here on this channel, and you can also find it on Jack the Ripper. Suspect Louis Deemschutz is one of them. But one final person to whom I will add is Sir William Gull, and I don't think he's a free-floating suspect. And I just want to give this final note that Sir William Gull is in two different theories. One of them is he was Jack the Ripper, and the second one is that he committed the crimes in a carriage, and the carriage driver dragged the women into the carriage, and that Walter Sickert was an additional participant in that. Now, William Gull was in his 70s at the time. I just don't think that Jack the Ripper was that old, and I don't think that he murdered women at all at that age, and I just simply do not endorse anything. Sir William Gull was a royal physician, and he gets into a royal conspiracy. I would also include him in the bottom of the barrel suspects. I don't think that's what happened, but if you want to challenge me on any of these points, please put your ideas in the comments section down below. And there are other Jack the Ripper suspects whom I haven't talked about yet on this channel that I'm waiting to explore, but I would love to know what you think about the strong suspects, the mid-level suspects, and the bottom suspects, not to mention the free-floating suspects. Now, I am just going to turn it over to you guys. Share anything that you would like, and thank you for listening to this episode of Ripper Wednesday. And I will see you over on Instagram. You can also write me at BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com, and until next time.